Hello, Clearwater. It feels great to be home after 38 years with this city. The recession actually took my position away, and I got to tell you, the class of Mr. Bill Horn, as he told me that that position was going away, was something special. So thank you, Bill, on how you handled that. You have to be proud first to understand where you came from. We asked the SWAT team people, where does the SWAT team come from? I don't know, it's here, I'm here, and they pull their pants up and they throw their chest out. No, you came from something special. And when I came here in 1972, Gulf to Bay had one Italian restaurant, Vince Anna, before you had Capone's. Countryside, you could hunt deer and shoot doves. Clearwater Beach had a drawbridge that we would close when we had a bad guy on the beach so we could trap that person. On and on and on. But what Clearwater never, ever wavered on was the leadership within city government and the leadership within the communities. That's why I'm here. As they said, they don't pay me to come here, and certainly as a past employee, on a beautiful day like this, I would not be here normally, but when they said I could come see you, I'm here. And to say that lightly, I don't. And I would say, Joanna did trick me, though. I'll tell you the trick. I'm at the bank, I'm depositing a check, and she says, Jeff, she says, would you talk to a few of my neighbors? And I said, sure, Joanna, I'll do anything for you. She didn't tell me Keynote for the coalition. She said, talk to a few of my neighbors. So let me ask you, today we're not going to have the time to really build a solid foundation. Normally when I go to a community, and I travel all over the country looking at communities, that's why I'm telling you what I'm saying today about your community in Clearwater is special. I would have them give a pre-survey so I would know what the expectations would be. I would do demographics about the attendees. I would hold maybe a collaborative lab session so we could identify issues that you want to address. And then we have to stay focused on the first issue that comes up before we do the second or third. And we go through each issue and we lay a foundation. Today we'll be lucky to do a footer, which is just digging the hole before you pour the foundation. But you already have a pretty good foundation because of who you are. Look who's here today. Saturday afternoon from 1 to 4. It speaks volumes. So let me go on. I used to train police departments around the country as well on code compliance. One of my responsibilities is what Mr. Delk does now, and that's code compliance. One of the toughest departments you could ever do. Councilmember Johnson got me into that business. I was a happy lieutenant on the police department, thinking life was good, and all of a sudden he opened this door to code enforcement. Code enforcement regulates and instructs businesses and residents, which you sure know, what's acceptable. And we practiced education, communication, and education, communication, cooperation. I always felt people would do the right thing if they knew what the right thing was. Not to come in heavy-handed, not to come in, this is government, we're trying to control, but to actually work together. So we would do block by block, and literally I felt we were getting to where we had a city without blight. Now what was mentioned earlier was we're on our fourth roof. Our fourth roof. Take a look around, our city's not blighted. You can walk any neighborhood in this city. I feel I can walk any neighborhood in this city without fear. You can't do that in other places. So I got a call one time to go down and teach the Metro-Dade Police Department. And I went through about 3 or 4 classes, and every time at the end of the class I'd ask the officers, how many of you plan to stay here after you retire? Not one. Not one, which really opened my eyes. You don't want to stay in it. Not one. And they wanted me to train something like 3,000 officers. I said, I can't do that. And I came back to Clearwater, happy to get back. Then I got a call down to West Palm Beach. And they said, come on down and just give a course for our police officers because we really need to interact with the communities. I said, okay, I'm coming. So I'm in the middle of a class and I'm teaching the police officers. And the police officers, and this is no disrespect for police officers because I was one for 30 years, they have the attention span of a gnat. So you really got to get their attention in the beginning. And so we got their attention and we were having a good class. And about 10:30, this lady walks in and she hands me a note. And the note says, you're going to meet the mayor for lunch. Well, other than maybe our mayor, I've never done lunch with a mayor. And I thought, that's strange. So, okay. So I meet the mayor for lunch. Her name is Nancy Graham. She was Woman of the Year for the state of Florida. She did most of the talking. And at the end of the lunch, she says, you're the one I want. See the city manager. You're staying overnight tonight. And I says, what? She says, I've already called your work. They know you're not coming back. I thought, what? So I said, all right. So I called work, and he says, well, just hear what she has to say. She's got something. So I stayed that night. Next morning, lady knocks on the door. They put me in a hotel, nice hotel. And by the way, when they put me in a hotel, they put me on the top floor. 9 o'clock at night, they called me, and he says, open the drapes. I opened the drapes. They said, what do you see? I said, well, I see the city of West Palm Beach. They said, that's your city. I said, that's my city. What are you talking about? We'll explain in the morning. So morning comes, lady comes to my room. She says, come with me. She takes me in the car. She takes me out to the edge of the Everglades. There's a deputy standing there with his arms crossed on an airboat, and he says, have a seat. I sit down. I said, what are you doing? He says, just have a seat. And we take off on this ride, and it wasn't like a tourist ride. I mean, it was a good ride. We take off, and he takes this little cove, and he says, I understand you're a fisherman. And there's bass rolling in this cove. He says, this is your private spot. I says, what? Takes me back. She takes me out to the stadium. At that time, the Braves were still there. They were practicing their spring training there. City manager meets me in a golf cart, drives me up to the head people in the Braves organization. They sign a shirt. They give me a baseball. He says, those 2 seats up there, those are the 2 seats you'll have for spring training. I says, again. He says, because you're going to be our next police chief. I says, next police chief? I don't even know who you people are. That kind of a job for a major city like that is advertised nationally. That's not taken lightly. People would screen you to the extent, and so I go back, and she takes me down to the yacht club, and she introduces me to the media as their next police chief. And I says, ma'am, please don't do that. I haven't even talked to family. I got a job. I have a job. She says, don't worry about it. And she says, we'll take care of all that. And I says, well, long story short is, downtown was beautiful. She was very good at what she did. She improved downtown. It looked like $1 million. I mean, it was something to behold. But she wanted me, when I found out later, after 3 trips down there, and she made 1 trip up to Clearwater, that she wanted what you have. She wanted Clearwater neighborhoods. She thought I could give her Clearwater neighborhood feeling. I says, well, let me take a look. Well, there's 10 or 12 cultures out there. There was Guatemalans, there was Haitians, there was Jamaicans. There was people in the backyard practicing voodoo, rolling the bones. I'm going, how am I going to communicate with these folks? How am I going to bring them together? How are we going to do anything that's really meaningful? So I came back, and as you do when you offered something like this, and she says, well, if you come here, she says, you'll retire as a multimillionaire. And she pointed to the marina. Well, the marina, the biggest ship we have in our marina, would sit on top of their ship with a helicopter on top of that. And I'm going, and the food they served me, I didn't recognize it, so I wasn't sure if I could eat it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a whole different class system. But even with that, it's the haves and the have-nots and not many people in the middle. I thought, can I make what we've got in Clearwater happen? I went back and I thought about family and I thought about Clearwater, and I turned her down. She put it in writing and I turned her down. I came back, I was happy as can be. And to this day, I don't regret it because of who you are. So I'm going to ask you, what makes you feel comfortable or at home? Anybody? Why did you come to Clearwater? Nobody knows? Yes, sir. What is it? Oh, see, you left Miami. So he's one of those that said, I'm not staying. He's coming up here to, okay. What?
The number of people you see on the streets walking dogs, riding bikes, very friendly.
Very friendly, very healthy community, certainly. Got some up here. Both of these here.
I got a good job here, working for the county, number one. And second of all, my father-in-law, who was a pilot for Pan Am, has researched this area as having one of the best air qualities in the whole country.
Oh, I didn't know about the air quality. Okay.
My husband and I moved here because we wanted to move south. We looked at Boca Raton. We looked at Jacksonville. We looked on the East Coast and the West Coast. And the reason we moved here was because it had everything we wanted. 20 minutes from Tampa where we could go see the Bucks. It was 15 minutes, we're up off McMullen Booth Road, 15 minutes from the beach. We could take walks around our neighborhood, stores and location, and people weren't in a hurry to serve you and get your butt out of a restaurant or a store. I don't mean to sound like Pollyanna. Everybody's not in a good mood all the time. That's just life. But I can tell you for a fact, I have never regretted for a second that we moved to Clearwater.
Well said. Let me tell you something. We mentioned the department leaders here and the council members here, and you're here. Government is us. Government's us. So if you have a complaint, you're complaining about yourself. It's us together. They're elected leaders, but really, truly, The money that we pay these folks, I wouldn't do a consulting job somewhere for that, and they get it for the whole entire year. So you can tell the love they have for Clearwater. So I would say to you that if you work together, and we're only setting the footer today, we'll set up a plan for you if you want. I'll work with Joanna and the rest of the organization to set a plan if you'd like. But to get your taste buds going, to realize that if this is us and we're in it together, we've got to protect it. My goodness, there's gangs across the country that'll shoot each other because somebody steps foot on their property. I mean, we got to protect what we have or we'll lose it. You've got some upcoming council members like David. These folks care about what we do in this community. So I want to ask you, how far are you willing to go? Are you willing to proceed further? Do you just come out for a couple hours and say, that was good, but I don't think we got anything done? I think we got a lot done because you're here. So I want to ask you, what's a neighborhood? What's the definition of a neighborhood? Does anybody know? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Neighborhood is a nice community, neighbors get along.
Absolutely, good definition. Now I'll give you the federal government's definition. They say a neighborhood has to be homeowned and occupied by 65% or more people. If there's less than 65% that own and occupy a home in a community, it's considered transient and not a neighborhood. I don't go by that definition. I go by this, and I go by this. If you've got the heart, you've got the mind, whether you're a renter or a property owner, we can make it work together. Now, Miami was a different story, as the gentleman said. There was issues down there, and obviously, if the city government wanted to move once they retired, it spoke volumes. I'll tell you something else I didn't take for granted, because I traveled around when I was in undercover narcotics and other positions on the police department, was the honesty of the city or county government was of concern to me, because I wanted to go home that night. So there's a local government that's within 50 miles of us. We were going to buy, I think it was 200 pounds of pot from this group. And the group said, I'll know if you're a police officer because police officers are working with us. And I said, what? And so I'm calling the police department down there at this community. I meet with the head of the agency, and he says, yeah, there's at least 2 in there that are not right. But he says, we got people throughout this government that aren't right. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not used to working in that condition. Because in Clearwater, if we make a mistake, and we can make a mistake, I mean, I make mistakes daily, just ask my wife. We make a mistake, that's just a situation that happens. But if it's corrupt, that's a whole different level. You don't have that here. So embrace it. If you ask anybody here, the mayor, anybody else, if anybody does anything that's inappropriate, the woodshed's out back, we'll take them there very quickly and you won't see them again. And that's okay. So don't underestimate the value that brings. So what is a neighborhood, 65% or more? No, it's this and it's this. So I want to go on here with some other remarks again. So I mentioned earlier that we must consider the beliefs, values, and customs of the neighborhood. So I used to teach both our employees and our students now that I'm into college to show the respect for the neighborhood that they deserve. If you're responsible for this geographic grid, this zip code, or Morningside neighborhood is in your area of responsibility, then you need to know the history of Morningside neighborhood. You need to know the demographics of it. And the demographics, how would you find out demographics of a community in Clearwater? Anybody know? Anybody know how you find that out? Simple. You're in it. The library. Walk up to your librarian, give them your zip code. They'll give you the printout from the census. They'll tell you exactly what's happening in your neighborhood. They'll tell you how many home-owned and occupied properties you have. They'll tell you the education system, or how many are their educational levels. They'll tell you the income levels. They'll say if there's 1 parent or 2 parents. They'll talk about race. They'll talk about religion. All these things are on your census. Now, why is that important? Because when we had our multiple departments, I had 5 different divisions. I had planning and I had plans review, and I had neighborhood services, code enforcement, building inspections, and one more. There's one more. I'm just slipping. But anyway, 5 of those. I wanted to make sure that the folks that we had represented the communities that we're responsible to work with. A local city here, when I was in transition, offered me a position as an assistant city manager, and no sooner they offer it, they called me back the following week and said, we can't have you as a city manager. I said, what happened? I don't know of anything in my closet, although Councilmember Hamilton would argue that, but I don't know of anything in my closet. And so they said, well, you're an old white guy, and we've got a lot of old white guys in our departments. We can't have you. Now, you're not supposed to say that by our charter regulations, but guess what? I love the honesty. And I says, I understand. You need a demographics. You should do that in all of your departments, not just the city management team. Because how are we going to communicate if we don't understand each other from our life experiences? I can say, oh, I know how you feel, but I really don't know how you feel. So when we start talking about this, understand the demographics. Now, we need to speak to the elephant in the room on this one when it comes to demographics. When you hold these community meetings, the most difficult thing is to get people to come back. There's got to be something in it for them. We call it the WIIFM. What's in it for me? How can I get you to come back? And you got to let people vent. It might be something that happened. Well, you see it now in the news with the Me Too and the other moves. Something that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it bothers somebody, and they're going to tell you about it. Let them say it. It's okay. And it's okay to say the sky is not blue out there today. The sky is yellow. It's okay. Just let them say what they need to say because they're part of your community. If you don't give them equal opportunities to speak, then you can't connect with them. So when we bring these people together and we start talking about these things, I want to make sure that you know to sustain these things, there's got to be something in there for them. Now the next thing, and one of the most important things you have to do, and you have to earn this, it's not given to you. I mean, some of you I just met today, most of you I got hugs from and handshakes from. James hugged me, which made me feel uncomfortable. But mostly handshakes. I missed you. I do miss you, and I miss working with you. But the rest of you that I don't know, I want to work with you. The mayor, I pull him out to the classroom all the time. City manager all the time. He serves as a mentor to our students. In the back of the room, by the way, so I don't forget to mention them before this is over, I have a little table set up from St. Pete College. If you're, Elizabeth, what age is it that they can take free courses? At 60? You want to take courses out there at 60, come take them. They're free. We teach public policy administration. The average age of our student in our class is 28 years old. We've got them from 24 to 62. We had a gentleman graduate, I think it was a semester or two ago. He was 62 years old. He says to me, can I have my mother come to the graduation? I said, your mother? She was 90. 90 years old. We put her in the front row. Italian lady. He says, now my mother's pretty outspoken. She might give you that universal Italian sign. I says, oh my gosh. Yeah, she needs to be in the front row so she doesn't stand up and give me that sign from the back row. But we put her up there. She was so proud of her son graduating. We got a note last week from him. He's going on for his graduate degree. He's had 3 promotions since he left us, and he works for Pinellas County. We have success stories that'll make your hair stand up on your neck for happy for the people that went through. It just makes a difference because the more of those people that we put in our community, the more we can protect what Clearwater has. Duke Tiemann said it best. Duke Tiemann was the president for years in South Greenwood Citizens for Progressive Action. He said, you know, it's like, Jeff, if you got weeds in your garden and you pull them today, are you okay? I says, well, I'm okay for today. He says, that's right. You got to go out there and weed the garden all the time. So how do we sustain your involvement in this organization that is putting their heart and soul into it for no money? They're not consultants. They're not saying, here's what you do and getting on a plane. They're here for their neighborhood as well. How do we get you to come back? Well, I think today when you do the rest of this, when we're done speaking, you'll figure that out. I've got some pointers for you after James is done that I can help get you on that track. But with 45 minutes, we're limited on how much we can build. But trust me, you already have momentum. We just got to keep it going and realize that this is not done overnight. Any kind of issues you have that happened that are of direct concern to you did not occur overnight, so Mr. Horn cannot fix it overnight. He's got to work on it. Now, the neat thing is he has a qualified staff to do that. Qualified, honest, dedicated staff. And he's here, he's willing to communicate with you on anything. We laughed before we got up here. He said, oh, Jeff, I had to come because every time you're there, you give me more work. So this may give him more work, but he really would do that work, which is something that most people can't say. So the elephant in the room is, besides the what's in it for me, is how do we build trust? That word trust. I had the opportunity, I went up to the FBI Academy. I was on the police department, and 1/2% of the police officers in the world get a chance to attend the academy up there in Quantico, and I had an opportunity to go up there for 3 months. I remember as you'd go back to your dorm, there'd be different world-renowned speakers coming into the auditorium, and they said they're going to have I think it was Admiral going to speak about trust. I says, trust? Because these talks went on for 2-3 hours, and I says, well, I'll go hear the Admiral. best 2 or 3 hours I ever had talking about trust. Don't underestimate that. Please don't. Recognize again, like Councilmember Duran, these folks have given you everything they can give you. Councilmember Hamilton is on his last term here, coming up if he's reelected. Embrace that, because they're willing to trust you if you're willing to trust them. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, the SWAT commander buddy that I have in Pasco, James Steffens. James Steffens? Oh boy.
My name is James, and it's James Steffens, and it's an absolute privilege to be back here. I grew up here. I grew up just over near Clearwater High School. I went to Plum Elementary School, and I was privileged to be a member of your agency, your police department, for 20 years before I retired in 2009. Here's the situation. I'm going to talk to you about trust. My dad, Jeff Kronschnabl, right there, he has been a mentor of mine since 1988, since I came on board the police department. A mentor of mine, and I can pick up the phone at any time and he'll be there for me. I have disappointed him during my life. I've also made him feel pretty good about claiming me as one of his sons. And it's because of trust, and it's about value, and it's about doing that thing that comes from inside here and makes the difference. I'm a captain right now at the Pasco Sheriff's Office. I've been a chief of police. I've been a commander of this, a commander of that. None of that matters unless I have my name and my integrity and there's trust. There's people in here who have served our country in armed services, and I thank you for your service. And you allowed folks like me to be able to grow up in a society in America and to be free. It's also built on trust. I've been to El Salvador as one of the places I've traveled around the country and the world. And I'm telling you about El Salvador because I was down there under the Department of Justice, under the COPS grant, to talk about community policing to Central America, to a place within San Salvador that they were killing on average 150 bus drivers a year, just bus drivers, for driving buses. And if they didn't get into the extortion scheme, they took them out of the bus and they executed them right in the community that I was dropping in as an expert from Clearwater, Florida, to talk to San Salvador about community policing, problem solving, and partnershiping. And I stood out there with my partner as we launched this pilot program. I didn't have all my weapon systems. All I had was pretty much my looks, or what that would get me, my personality, what that would give me, but my integrity and my name of having come from the United States of America, from Clearwater, because we do things phenomenally well here, and we allow ourselves to be looked at, and we allow ourselves not to get into status quo. And law enforcement, if anybody under my command goes into that status quo thing, I get really upset about it, because status quo gets you killed in what I do. It gets you killed. It means you've accepted where you're at. And it means that it's okay to accept where you're at. And in my work, in my profession, it gets you killed. So anyone that works around me, I don't let them say they work for me. Anybody that comes around me, they work with me. It's a team. Problem solving and partnershiping, the two core foundations for community policing, which is community policing. Jeff talked about that you're the government. I first was thinking about a joke. I'd stand in front of you and say, I'm the government, I'm here to help you, right? And have this like tagline, this thing. But you're the government. The community are the police, and the police are the community. You're the one that lives in those communities. I grew up near Plum. I've known about things that worked really well for Clearwater and things that worked really badly for Clearwater. I have been privileged to be one of your sons. And I'm here to talk in my few remarks about trust. Because if you don't have it, and I'm preaching to the choir here, then you better go find it. Because you're in what we would call deep kimchi. And that's a Korean reference from members of my family from Korea. If you've ever tried kimchi, you'll know that you've tried it. I don't know if you'll ever try it again, but you at least tried it. Trust. I'm going to beat that word right here into wherever I can beat it into, because when you're asking your city council, your city leaders to do something for you, You've got to do that thing that allows yourself to get out of your comfort zone, to allow yourself to be told some things that you don't want to hear about, but you have to hear about and you need to hear about. Because even where I've traveled, whether or not it was Seattle or Tacoma out there or up in Maine or Boston, I guess you have to say it like that, Boston, or New York, you know, I'm a native Floridian, so I got to work on all that stuff. But no matter where you travel, I've always found that Clearwater is home. I know Sand Key before it became the Sand Key that we know today. I know about the things that have gone on that have caused us to be brought to our knees in both despair as well as unbelievable thanks. And Clearwater makes that. We're diverse. I was your district commander for what's known as the West Side, everything from Highland to the water. And I was also your district commander from the water to the water. So from Coachman right to the water. I've commanded both of those districts. The only district I didn't command when I was in Clearwater was the countryside area. But the two districts that I did command, the West Side, Joanna is hiding back there a little bit, and Shelley hiding back there a little bit. I'm going to put them on the spot about this trust thing. I remember when the first times my phone rang and she introduced herself, "Hi, this is Joanna. We have a problem, and you're going to help me fix it." And from that moment of the trust that she put towards me as a representative of your police department, my police department, to, my God, 25 years later or something, or whatever this crazy number is, I could pick up the phone and she'll be there for me. And I'm hoping that when she picks up the phone, I will be there for you, because we had tough days where she was on me relentlessly about the homeless, about the neighborhood quality of life, about the crime, about this, about that, where I would see my phone and I'd be like, what did I do now, right? It's Joanna, and I have to answer it. I have to take my licks. I love her for that. I love her for the fact that Shelley ganged up on me with Joanna and Shelley, and they would not let me give an answer that was less than anything 100% truthful. They wouldn't let me go around the edges and try to put some polish on it. They say, "James, tell me the truth. What are we doing about this? What do you need for help? How do we get it done? What do we do?" I love that about them. I love the fact that I walked in here and they hugged me. I love that because it meant that what we did mattered, and what we are doing now matters, and what we are going to do matters. And Jeff talked about the history of SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. Every SWAT operator that's out there volunteers to do the work of a SWAT operator. I have put people's lives into my hands, and I have sent them into harm's way. And the one thing that they went off into the mission knowing is that I was doing everything I could do to bring them back safely. But I told them on every mission they went on, you have to trust. We have a plan. We've worked really hard. We've got all these strategies. But you're going to come back changed emotionally, physically, psychologically, perhaps spiritually. You're going to go in because you're doing that thing. You're crossing that threshold into the uncertainty. And when you come back, you're going to be changed. And what did you learn from that? What did you learn from that experience? And they trusted me, as I trusted Jeff when he was the SWAT commander when I first joined the police department. So my remarks to you are this: what you're doing here is phenomenal. The fact that today you're going to talk about things that make you uncomfortable, outstanding. If you walked in here and things are supposed to be good, that, whoa, Clearwater is the tip of the spear, it is the international gem in everybody's eyes and everything's great, then you shouldn't be here, because your head's in that beautiful sugar sand. If you walked through that door and said, hey, status quo is not what Clearwater is about. Where are we going to be at today, at the end of today? Where are we going to be at 10, 15 years from now? Then you got through that door correctly. And it takes courage to be courageous. And you walking through here where you could be anywhere else when it's 85 degrees out there for the first time since last year, you could be anywhere, but you chose to be here. So my contract with you and Jeff's contract with you is, are you ready to go to work? Are you ready to do that thing and peel that onion open and look at the layers and identify where the problems are, whether or not they're self-evident or they're perceived or they're reality, and what are you prepared to do about it? And I'll date myself a little bit, but Sean Connery was in the movie called The Untouchables. Does everybody or anybody remember Sean Connery? Yeah, of course. There's a movie called The Untouchables when he was basically going up against Al Capone. And there's a pivotal scene in the movie where Sean Connery, who's trying to help Kevin Costner, who's Elliot Ness, Sean Connery has been mortally wounded, and he's bleeding out. And Kevin Costner comes in there, and he's trying to triage, trying to figure out, and he thinks that Sean Connery's trying to give him this piece of paper there. And Sean Connery's not. He's trying to do this, he's trying to give him a pendant, and it's actually a bus schedule. The point of my story is that at some point, Sean Connery says to Kevin Costner, now that he has the information, he goes, "What you prepared to do now," right? My best Scottish for you. What are you prepared to do now? And that's my remarks to you. If we're talking about trust, and you're being given the information, and you're outside your comfort zone, and we're peeling this onion back, and we're thinking about where do we want Clearwater to be in the future? If you're that person that walked through that door, and you're willing to work with your city council, you're willing to work with your city manager, with your police chief, with your deputy police chief, you're willing to work with each other and your neighbor, even if you can't stand them, even if they've upset you and they've got you like really like that. I've learned that I have to be a better active listener in order to be an effective problem solver. I have a lot of scar tissue. People that know me like, James, you're complicated. You have a lot of layers. Yes, I do. Life has really come at me and I've embraced it. I know who I am and I absolutely love who I am, but the person in the mirror is the person you can't lie to. When you're standing in front of the mirror, that's the one person you can't do anything but accept the truth and the reality of your situation. And you have to love that person unconditionally. You have to trust that person unconditionally, and that helps you go to where you need to get to. I got to return today with my beautiful fiancée Nancy sitting over there. I got to return as a Clearwater guy, a son of yours. My travels have taken me where they've taken me. But back to El Salvador, what I learned about the little kids all the way to the most elderly of elderly is that they're looking for the trust. They're looking for the trust to find out if their country and all the other Central American countries that we are training during this evolution, do they care about them? Are they really willing to do something to improve their quality of life? And when I looked at those little sets of eyes, and the eyes that are really old, I looked for the thing and I saw hope. I saw hope. Hope that they can trust that tomorrow's going to be a better day than it is today. And I know that if we can do that in San Salvador when the crime is epic, the country is beautiful, man, we're way ahead of it here. But we should never allow that to be status quo. We got work to do. So I'm going to turn it back to Jeff. We have additional remarks. I think we have some work to do. I hope that we're going to be engaged in the problem, working together. Privileged to return to you. And I thank you for listening to me talk about trust. So thank you.
All right, communication, communication, communication. That's our next step. I require that our students watch the news and have to come back each week and tell me something about international, national, state, or local news. But I gotta be honest, it's painful. First 10, 15 minutes is just nothing but divisiveness. We gotta get past that. It's not about what political party you're affiliated with, whether you're liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, and independent. That's not it. What about the issue? What are we going to do together to resolve the issue? If you can't do that, then step back and put somebody in there that can do that. Because that's what we're going to do in this neighborhood coalition. We're going to address an issue at a time, and we're going to communicate about that issue, and we're going to work towards resolution. So the next thing I got this book up here. It says, Building Communities from the Inside Out. One of the first chapters they have in there is to identify and release individual capacities. Again, kudos to the city of Clearwater, because once a year you have a neighborhoods day. They come out and they do a block party and you get to meet your neighbors, because most of the time I would ask people, raise your hand if you know the full name of your neighbor. Well, and here, yes, but I don't think that's what happens when I ask it mostly. Do you even say, well, I wave to them. I look and see if his lawn's greener than mine. You know, and sometimes I hear some shouting in there or a dog barking, but I don't know my neighbor. Well, it says here, take the time to realize what you have in your neighborhood for resources. It's very impressive. If you actually sat down at a round table at your neighborhood association meeting or crime watch meeting and said, tell me a little bit about yourself. What are your strengths? What do you do for a living? What did you do for a living? You know, one thing I learned, and the bank was a little scared. I wanted to build a house, and I tried to build a house that would be annexed into the city so I could be on your council. I got the house built, but I didn't get the annexation. But to have said that, I had a friend that was a contractor. I couldn't afford it. But he gave me this big listing. And he gave it to me and says, well, here, you got to order trusses, you got to have electrical, you got to, everything's in here, forecast. I mean, it's all the steps. He says, follow the steps, you'll be good. I said, what? But the bank said, I'll tell you what, if you go through different levels, we'll let you do a draw on this loan. And that bank gave me the loan. I'd hire the subcontractors, I would negotiate, they'd come in, and once a week that friend would come by and he'd write on the board, no, no, and heck no, with colorful language and tell me what I did wrong. I'd take quick notes and I'd go out there and I'd fix it, and next week he'd come back to the same thing. I have a beautiful house, probably saved 40% on building it myself. What I learned about that was to recognize the skills of the neighbors. The majority of the contractors, because I walked the streets of Clearwater, I went up into the neighborhoods and asked them, can you do my framing? Can you do my plumbing? Can you do this? Can you do, because I knew they were good. We had talked. I had trust with them. I had communication with them. And then the next thing this book talks about is understanding not only what you have in the neighborhood besides the skill sets, but the personalities. So we did something once in Clearwater. I thought this would be just interesting. I don't know how this is going to go, but I thought we'd try it. We held a meeting, went to our parks and rec leaders because they know every youth in the neighborhood. If they don't know them, that young man or woman can't get a basketball, can't get a baseball, they know everybody. So I said, can you bring some of the youth in so we could ask them for their perspective? And he says, sure. Either they come in or they don't play. I said, okay. So he brought it. So I went to the first one. We had city leaders up there. We had fire chief and somebody from the police department, somebody from City Hall. And I just said to him, tell me what you think about Clearwater. Average age, about 16. First gentleman gets up there, I'd call it pants on the ground, hat turned around. You know, I'm going, so I'm already judging him in not a good way. And here's what he said. How come my neighborhood is not as aesthetically pleasing as North Greenwood? And I says, what did he just say? He says, you think because I'm a black man that I'm North Greenwood. No, I am Sandy Lane Community. This is our rec center. We don't have the same lighting, landscaping, roads, or hours or equipment that they have 5 blocks from us. Why not? Well, that just opened up my eyes. I says, oh my goodness. We have yet to tap into that resource. We haven't tapped into it because it started to grow so fast that I didn't have the personnel to do it. I still think we need to revisit it. Because the youth are going to be what? The property owners of the future. And I'll tell you something. My biggest battles when I was in those 5 divisions wasn't with race, wasn't with the sex, wasn't with the age. Excuse me. It was with age. Age was the biggest divider. So there was a community, 55 years old and up, and a young 30-year-old contractor, construction guy comes in there. Well, all the other people, look at him, what's he going to do? What's he? And this lady walks up and he's cutting down these 2 grapefruit trees. And she says to him, what are you doing? He says, I'm cutting down these trees. And she says something else. He tells her, mind your own business. Well, she goes and gets everybody. And they march down and they're pointing at his house. Well, he brings everybody home from the work site. This got so bad, he painted his house psychedelic pink with flowers like he had out there in San Francisco. He put his furniture on the front lawn. He put a hot tub in the driveway. He brought the guys back, and they toasted the neighbors with beers every night. And then it wasn't enough because it kept going back and forth. There was one up, some shit they did. So about 9 o'clock at night, when people like me are going to bed, he would fire up the leaf blower and run up and down the street till the lights came back on, and then he'd run back to his house. I had people calling me with death threats towards him. Police department had hundreds of calls. I was in code compliance. We had hundreds of calls. And then what happened was, and this is outlandish, an older lady got on the web and found out how to make a firebomb, and she firebombed his truck. We arrested her. The guy moved out of the neighborhood. the issue was resolved. But we never got it resolved as a government entity. The neighborhood was still at odds. What I'm trying to tell you is it's up to us to communicate with one another. If your neighbor's branch is hanging on your property, don't call us. Talk to your neighbor. Most people don't do it. They call government. I want that branch removed. Well, that's civil law. We can't remove that branch. So what I'm saying to you is communication, communication, communication. The next step I want to talk to you real quick, get back to my notes here. We want to release the power of the neighborhoods. We found with the recent turmoil that we had, we found really, again, the quality of people helping people during Hurricane Irma was off the charts. I saw in different neighborhoods in Clearwater groups that were informally gathering to help each other put up window coverings. When the storm went by, to take window coverings down. So in the back of the room, I task my students, I give them a really tough one. They actually have to do a consultant report for what we call a capstone. So when they finish their baccalaureate degree over at St. Pete College, they're doing a consultant report. So in the back, you'll have Joe Voigt. Call up, Joe, raise your hand. He's doing his capstone on what do we do as neighbors to take care of ourselves for the first 72 hours after a storm. Government's not coming. In Katrina, you saw that. There's the winds at a certain level, they hunker us down, we wait until it's safe to come out. What are you going to do to take care of yourselves for the first 72 hours? Which community are you working with, Joe?
Right now, Largo.
He's working with Largo, but he'd love to work with Clearwater. So if you're interested, fill out these surveys he's got. I'll get with Mr. Horn to make sure I didn't give him any more work on this one. But we're going to try and see if we can figure something out, because if we have to deliver water to you or some kind of resources, it would be nice to have a central location in each neighborhood to drop that. It would be nice to know, is June home? Because she lives by herself. Is she home? You know, she's on medication. Has anybody checked on her? We don't know that. You know that. We don't want to get that personal in your business. So figure out a way to make that work. We had another one that we fixed up, by the way, that was interesting, and we're working on around the area. It's going to be put up. I know I got only a few minutes, but one of my concerns was that as government employees, a number of us had to be called back in case of an emergency. And we had to say, take care of your families. We're calling you back. You might be hunkered down for those 3 days, those 72 hours, and your families better be able to take care of themselves. Well, we saw in some of these things, it took longer than 72 hours in other cities, and then people had to make a decision. Do I come in? Or do I take care of my family? And you saw in Katrina, 200 police officers walked off the job. So Tarpon Springs just put in place, well, they are going to bring in their families of the employees, put them in a city property that is hurricane resistant to include their dogs, feed them and take care of them while their employees are working with you to get your neighborhood up and running. How good is that? We do that every year over at Daytona. When Chevy comes in, they run a hotel every year. Those people don't have to worry about anything. Their family's taken care of while they're out there on the racetrack. Well, that was just something new. We got to be innovative in our thoughts. We can't do things as we've always done them. Mark Twain said, if you always do what you did, you always get what you got. I'm telling you today, if you always did what you did, you're going to be way behind. You got to do something new. Remember, we're on the 4th roof? So that was one of the things we're talking about. So Joe's in the back. Feel free to talk to him. So Margaret Mead, I got a couple of good quotes in here, so I'm going to sprinkle them in here just to get your juices going, because I want to come back and see you again. I want Clearwater to stay as it is. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. The only thing that ever has. So can you name some of the most powerful groups within Clearwater neighborhoods that you have within your neighborhood? Give me some powerful groups. Who's got that other microphone? Where is it? I want to have somebody, tell me some powerful groups you have in your neighborhood. Groups. Besides, you got neighborhood association, right? I'll start with that. Give me another one. Church. Absolutely the churches. I'll go off on a story on that. Prior police chief was here. One neighborhood wanted him gone. City council came out, neighborhood came out. We ended up meeting at this location, central location in the neighborhood. They came up to the check-in desk. They were all fired up. There might be 5 in a group. And the people at the desk said, well, welcome to this night. We're going to talk through this thing. And by the way, there's 5 of you. You're at 5 different tables, and separate the group right away. I said, whoa, what happened there? So they had, the room was filled. Chief thought he was going to be terminated. Gentleman came in there and he spoke their language. You got to speak the tongues of your neighborhood. Spoke, got them all wound up, said, here's what we're going to do. And the city hasn't done what we need them to do. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And the city, yeah, that's right. And we can do this together? Yeah, that's right. And they went, we can do this together. And they said, before we start, though, let's eat. And they rolled in all this food. How do you feel after you eat? I feel pretty mellow. I don't want any fights at that point. Then we had tables that were together, and we had a scriber, and we had everybody at the table had a voice. This is important when you do your collaborative partnerships, by the way. Everybody has a voice. Don't ignore anybody, because if they don't have a voice, they're not coming back. So they said, how do we work on the crime rate in our neighborhood, especially when it comes down to narcotics dealing? So they put their thoughts together. They had one speaker from each table get up. They got a round of applause when they got up. They got a round of applause when they were done. Even a gangster got up and talked about how to get rid of the drugs and get a round of applause, and he sat back down. By the end of the night, it was us taking care of this business, government and us. And they gave kudos to the police chief, and we moved on and made some significant inroads there. To tell you how strong this is with your police department, and comments and compliments to them, is another city came up here and said, well, if you can't get what you want from the city of Clearwater, burn it down. Burn it down. And you know what the neighborhood told them? Go back to your city. We're okay. Get out of here. We're okay. And we work with them. I know I was on the projects for 15 years of my life. We work with them. Now, we still have issues. We're not negative, like James said. We still have issues. I don't like him. He's looking at me funny. She dresses funny. He smells like he's still at the Super Bowl. I mean, that kind of stuff comes up. But that stuff is not what we're doing here. We're looking at an issue within our neighborhoods on how Mr. Duran, if he was still sitting as a council member, could help us get through those issues so that at the end we celebrate our successes. Because all too often, we don't celebrate success. We just complain, and then it becomes like, do I even want to go back there? Those environments are awful when you have nothing but complaints. So you'd have churches, homeowner associations, crime watch associations, parks and rec leaders, civic clubs, AARP, hobby clubs, political groups, schools, etc. When we do this in a classroom, we do it on the board. Because you're going to miss a group. And you want to list that group because it's the strength of your neighborhood. Now we start talking about economic divisions within our neighborhood. I went in one neighborhood. She was looking out the window. She's pointing out the window some gangsters out there. And she says to me, see that? And I says, yes, I do. She says, you know what, Jeff? She says, you can be poor, but you can be clean. You can be poor, but you can be responsible. I don't know how those other people are letting their kids do that. Here's my kids, and she spoke proudly of where they were in their lives. Because it does take a village, but it also takes a foundation at their home with their parent. So, yes, I got 2 minutes. Oh, see, it happens every time. James took so long. That's what happened. All right, I'll leave you then. You can see that we want to get the footer done. I'm not sure if we did, but we can do the foundation. We can start you on a great path. I want to leave you with a couple of quotes. Not everyone's called to be a leader, but everyone can make a difference. Every one of you can make a difference. Make no mistake. Our students are proof of that. They make a great difference. And this one was Colin Powell. I loved him because I had the honor of escorting him one night. He says, to the world you may be only one person, but to the one person you may be the world. Think about that for a minute. That's what you're doing here. And there's 2 more. Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. That was, again, General Powell. If you don't make these meetings that you have fun and energy filled, nobody's coming back. They're not going to come back. And the last one we talked about is you always do what you did, you always get what you got. So I'm saying to you, power to the neighborhoods, power to you. And before Jack throws me off the stage, I want to see if James has any last minute comments. You're good? All right, thank you very much.